Okay, let's unpack this. Picture it. You've climbed the corporate ladder. You've made it.
Right.
You've reached that, that coveted corner office with the amazing view. You've got the executive title, the seat at the big table where the really high-stakes decisions get made.
Uh-huh. The power to genuinely shape things.
Exactly. It's the pinnacle, right?
Yeah.
The place so many people strive for. The ultimate symbol of professional success, of influence.
Definitely seen that way.
But what if once you finally get there, to that peak, you find out it comes with this profound and totally unexpected sense of isolation.
Not just loneliness, though. Something different.
Right, not just loneliness. It's a specific strategic isolation, something that actually impacts how effective you can be.
That's a really striking place to start, isn't it? Because we're sort of conditioned to think of the top as, I don't know, ultimate connection. You're surrounded by influence, networks, power players.
Yeah, that's the image.
But the source material we're diving into today, it paints a very different picture. And frankly, a much more complex one for a very specific group of leaders.
Absolutely. And that's the core paradox we're going to explore in this deep dive. It's based on an article called The 0.5% Alliance, When Leadership Excellence Requires Strategic Partnership.
Okay.
And the author is Helena Demuynck. She's described here as a passionate advocate for women's empowerment, a transformation guide, and a women's leadership expert. Lots of experience in authentic leadership coaching.
Right. And her work seems to really focus on this specific group.
It does. The article drills down into this unique phenomenon that specifically affects, well, the very highest level of women leaders.
And understanding Helena Demuynck's background, I think, is pretty crucial here for context. The source notes her work is really deeply rooted in helping these high-achieving women identify and break free from limitations, both internal and, external. She focuses on helping them redefine success on their own terms, amplifying their influence, and, as she puts it, shattering inner glass ceilings through holistic transformation.
Shattering inner glass ceilings, I love.
Yeah. And her book, It's Your Turn, Break Free from Societal Boxes and Manifest Your True Greatness, sounds like it reflects this exactly. Same with her platforms, like the Boundary Breakers Collective and Power Talks for Remarkable Females.
Okay. So this article, it's not coming out of the blue. It stems directly from, decades of her observing and coaching women navigating this really complex senior leadership landscape.
Exactly. It's written from a place of deep expertise on the, let's say, unique challenges women face as they climb higher.
Right. So our mission then in this deep dive is to take this source material, pull out its most important insights. We really want to understand this phenomenon she calls the isolation ceiling at the very, very top.
Yeah, get under the surface of it.
We'll dig into not just what it is, but, why it happens, what the tangible consequences are. And then we need to examine the specific and honestly pretty intriguing solution the author proposes, something called the 0.5% Alliance.
Okay. And what makes that different?
Well, that's the question, right? What makes this proposed solution fundamentally different from, say, traditional networking or leadership programs? And why does the article suggest it's not just helpful, but may be absolutely essential for sustained high-level leadership excellence for women at this particular altitude?
It sounds like it's about peeling back those layers of visible success, the shiny stuff, to expose the less visible challenges, the things that can undermine even the most accomplished leaders.
Exactly. And that brings us squarely to the core argument the article makes, which it frames as the paradox of the pinnacle.
The paradox of the pinnacle. Okay.
This is the idea that you achieve this immense professional success, the corner office, the title, the power, all the stuff you work so hard for, only to find that something absolutely crucial is fundamentally missing once you're there.
And the article kicks off with an anecdote, right? Something that really brings this paradox into sharp focus.
Yeah, it does. It describes a senior executive, someone who is undeniably, top of her game.
Right.
She's in her office, just came out of what the source calls a particularly brutal board meeting.
Ooh, been there. Well, metaphorically.
Right. She successfully navigated it, defended a controversial acquisition strategy, huge professional win, right? Demonstrated skill under serious pressure.
Okay, so a moment of triumph.
You'd think.
Yeah.
But the immediate feeling she talks about wasn't just triumph or relief. She looked around and realized, and this is the quote, "There was no one I could call who truly understood the weight of what I just navigated."
Wow, that hits hard at the absolute peak after a major win.
Yeah, and the feeling is isolation. Not just any isolation, but specifically peer-level isolation. It wasn't that she didn't have friends or colleagues.
No, it was the lack of someone who could truly grasp the specific nuance, the political tightrope she just walked, the sheer pressure of that exact situation from their own similar high-stakes executive experience.
Exactly. And the source really emphasizes this isn't just a fleeting feeling for a few people. It's an unspoken reality for many women who reach this level.
And the article tries to quantify this, right? It brings in some data points citing McKinsey research.
It does. What did it say?
Well, they found that while women have made progress holding about 26% of C-suite positions now, which is significant progress.
Okay, 1 in 4, roughly.
Right. But these women report significantly higher rates of workplace isolation compared to their male counterparts.
Significantly higher. How much higher?
The source states it's 34% higher.
34%. Oh, that's not a minor difference you can just brush off.
No way. It points to a really systemic difference in experience. It's a substantial gap in how they experience connection and belonging at work compared to men at the very same level. And maybe even more telling is the next stat the article pulls from that research. A staggering 72% of these senior women report having no safe space.
72%. No safe space to do what?
To process strategic challenges, explore ideas that aren't fully formed yet, or even just admit uncertainty with peers who genuinely understand their unique position, their perspective, and the sheer complexity of the decisions they're wrestling with.
Hang on. Almost 3 out of 4 women in the highest executive ranks feel they lack a single trusted peer context to grapple with their most critical, most difficult challenges.
That's what the data suggests, yeah.
Wow. 72% having no safe space.
Yeah.
That statistic, really, it puts flesh on the bones of that unspoken reality. It's not just that there are fewer women, which we know is true,
Right.
but their experience of being at the top includes this pervasive lack of a specific kind of peer connection. A vital one, it sounds like.
Exactly. And that's really the heart of the paradox as the article lays it out. Look, the higher you climb in any field, the smaller the pool of true peers gets, naturally.
Sure, fewer people operate at that level.
But specifically for women at the C-suite level, the pool shrinks even further because you're looking for peers who have both the necessary intellectual rigor and strategic experience to engage on these complex, high-stakes issues.
Okay,
And the lived understanding of the unique complexity of leading as a woman in systems that, as the article notes, often weren't necessarily designed for us.
the how. The lived experience piece.
Right. So it's this combination, limited, truly comparable peers, plus that additional layer of navigating existing structures that creates this particular, really potent form of isolation at the summit. The source calls it summit isolation.
Summit isolation. It makes complete sense when you put it like that. Your challenges become so specialized, so high stakes, so politically tricky. The number of people who can authentically get it and offer relevant strategic insight just shrinks dramatically. And then you add that dimension of navigating power dynamics, organizational politics, potentially shaped by decades of being male-dominated. That second filter must make finding true peers incredibly difficult.
Precisely. It's like a compounding effect.
Yeah.
Which leads to this unique isolation right at the pinnacle. So, as the article argues, this isn't just about feeling a bit lonely sometimes. It's a very specific kind of isolation with profound, tangible professional consequences. Consequences that impact not just the individual, but potentially the entire organization.
Which leads us directly into the next big point the article tackles, the magnificent isolation problem and its impact. And the author gives this phenomenon that name, summit isolation.
Right, defining it as that state where you have this unprecedented professional success, but it coincides with this diminishing supply of authentic connection, specifically the absence of strategic thinking partners who are operating at the same caliber, same level of trust.
Magnificent isolation. It sounds grand and terrible at the same time.
It does capture that paradox, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And the source outlines 3 key consequences that flow directly from this isolation. The first one is what the author calls the echo chamber effect.
Okay, the echo chamber. We hear that term a lot, but what does it mean specifically at this C-suite level?
Well, without a diverse group of equally experienced peers who can genuinely challenge your thinking peers who've navigated similar storms, but maybe from a different angle, a different
Yeah,
industry.
right.
Confirmation bias can just go completely unchecked, even at the highest levels,
Sure.
especially at the highest levels.
So your own brilliant ideas, your strategic assumptions, they can solidify and actually become blind spots simply because you lack peers operating at your level who can push back, offer a totally different perspective, or question an underlying assumption based on their own, hard-won wisdom.
Exactly that. At the C-suite level, decisions have massive ripple effects, often irreversible.
Huge stakes.
Huge. So if a leader's thinking isn't subject to rigorous challenge and validation from equals who bring genuinely diverse experiences, not just diverse opinions, but diverse experiences of high-stakes leadership, strategic blind spots can develop.
And these aren't necessarily from incompetence.
No, not at all. That's the key. It's not about lack of intelligence or competence. It comes from the absence of that essential multidimensional dialogue with peers who understand the scale of the decisions but see the chessboard differently. Think about the potential cost of a flawed strategy that wasn't stress-tested by truly independent, equally sharp minds.
That makes the echo chamber effect at the top sound, well, not just undesirable, but potentially really dangerous for the business itself.
It is. The stakes are just too high for critical thinking to go unchallenged. Which leads to the second consequence the article discusses, what it calls the performance paradox.
Performance paradox. Okay, what's the paradox here?
The source highlights that as women reach senior leadership, the performance expectations, the bar for excellence, it rises exponentially. You're expected to perform at an incredibly high level, consistently.
Which makes sense, right? More responsibility, higher expectations, standard stuff.
Right. But here's the paradox, and this is crucial. At the same time, psychological safety diminishes.
Ah.
Yeah.
Okay, so the very environment where you operate demands peak performance.
Exactly.
But the conditions that usually enable that peak performance, like feeling safe to explore ideas, admit you're not sure, seek counsel without fear of judgment, those conditions evaporate.
Precisely. They diminish significantly.
That feels like a really critical point. Why? Why does psychological safety drop off specifically for women at this level, according to the source?
The source doesn't go super deep into the why beyond pointing to that general idea of navigating systems not built for them and, the increased scrutiny that comes with being at the top. But the implication is clear. At the pinnacle, any perceived imperfection or uncertainty carries significant weight, maybe more weight for women.
There's that constant pressure to be on, right?
Sure.
To project absolute confidence, have all the answers all the time.
Exactly. And the article presents a truly striking statistic to underscore this. Get this. 83% of women in C-suite positions report carefully curating which challenges, vulnerabilities, or developing thoughts they actually discuss with internal colleagues.
83%.
Oh.
That's what, almost 9 out of 10 senior women feeling they have to filter what they say, hold back their real thinking process, hide areas of uncertainty when talking to people inside their own organization.
It creates what the article aptly calls a double bind.
A double bind. How so?
Well, precisely when these leaders are grappling with the most complex, multifaceted, maybe ambiguous decisions of their careers, decisions that need deep, nuanced thought, exploring multiple paths, maybe even admitting, I don't know yet, they feel least safe doing that openly within the very environment where those decisions have to be made. They feel they can't risk showing a thought that's still developing or admitting a potential struggle because of the perceived reputation risk, a risk that might be higher or feel higher because their women in roles often scrutinize more intensely.
So incredible pressure to make perfect decisions in a high-stakes game, but they lack the very conversational, exploratory environment needed to process those complex problems.
Yeah.
The kind of processing that allows for uncertainty and the evolution of thinking before you land on a final public decision, that sounds like a brutal trap.
It really is. And that pressure to perform perfectly without the necessary support structures, that leads to the third consequence the article identifies, innovation stagnation.
Okay, innovation stagnation. How does the isolation lead to that?
The source cites research pointing to something called collaborative collision as a primary source of breakthrough thinking.
Collaborative collision. I like that phrase. There's like productive friction.
Okay.
Like ideas bumping into each other, maybe challenging each other and creating something new, but based on trust.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. The source explains this happens when equally powerful but differently experienced leaders engage in rigorous, trust-based dialogue. It's not about gentle agreement all the time. It can be challenging, but it's grounded in mutual respect and a shared understanding of the level of play.
No.
The article argues that without these trusted communities of peers, people operating at the same strategic altitude, this essential collaborative collision just doesn't happen, or not enough.
And so innovative thinking, what narrows.
It narrows precisely when organizations need their top leaders to be most expansive, most creative, most open to new ideas.
So the lack of this specific kind of high-level peer interaction means the wellspring of breakthrough ideas potentially dries up right at the top.
Potentially, yes. Or it certainly doesn't flourish the way it could. And this isn't just a personal cost to the leader, feeling isolated or struggling to fully explore ideas. It's a significant potential cost to the organization, and maybe even the entire industry they influence.
Right. If the people making the biggest decisions aren't benefiting from diverse, rigorous peer challenge, their thinking can become insular, predictable,
Yeah.
maybe less innovative over time.
Exactly. So the collective impact of these consequences, you've got the echo chamber effect leading to blind spots, the performance paradox hindering open processing, and the resulting innovation stagnation. It creates what the source calls the success trap.
The success trap. Explain that.
You achieve the position of leadership, you get the title, the office. But that very achievement inadvertently diminishes the relational infrastructure. The peer connections, the safe spaces for processing that are absolutely necessary for sustainable excellence and continued innovation at that level.
So the structures that maybe supported you on the way up, they just aren't sufficient, or maybe aren't even present at the very top.
Exactly. You've reached the summit, but the robust, trust-based infrastructure you need to not just survive there, but to keep leading with impact, navigate the unforeseen storms, drive innovation, it isn't inherent in the role itself. You have to actively build it or find it somewhere else.
And the author, Helena Demuynck, she has a really powerful personal note here, doesn't she? Saying she's watched this pattern repeat for 2 decades.
Yeah, she's seen brilliant women grappling with massive decisions, potentially billions of dollars, impacting thousands of employees, all while operating in what she calls magnificent isolation.
Magnificent isolation. There it is again.
And her core belief, the thing that seems to drive her work in this article, is crystal clear. It doesn't have to be this way.
That personal perspective, it really lands. It underscores that this isn't just some academic theory. She's seen the human cost, the professional cost of this isolation firsthand. And she's convinced there's a better way forward.
Which naturally leads to, well, what is that better way?
Exactly. So if this is the problem, this pervasive and really detrimental, magnificent isolation at the top, what is the solution the article proposes? And this is where she introduces the 2.5% Alliance Mastermind.
Yes, the source presents this alliance as a fundamental reimagining, a new way to think about peer relationships for women right at the pinnacle of leadership. It's designed specifically as the antidote to that summit isolation we've been talking about.
And the article is super explicit, isn't it? This is not just another professional women's networking group. It's not a traditional leadership development program either.
Crucially, no. It's described as a carefully designed ecosystem. And I think the emphasis there is on designed and ecosystem. It's intentionally built, architected, with specific features to address the unique complexity and challenges that, quite simply, only make sense to someone operating at the specific altitude of influence and responsibility.
Calibrated, maybe. Calibrated to the level of the challenges these women face.
That's a great word for it. Calibrated.
Okay, so that deliberate design sounds key. What are the core features, then, that make this alliance thing fundamentally different from other groups or programs? The source outlines 3 key characteristics. First up, curated intelligence.
Right. The structure itself is precise. 8 women per alliance group. That's it. 8.
Yeah, small group.
And the selection process is critical. It's explicitly not about gathering a group of friends or even women who happen to be in the same industry. It's based on what the source calls complementary experience, cognitive diversity, and developmental alignment.
Okay, break that down. Complementary experience, cognitive diversity, developmental alignment.
So the goal is to create what some organizational scientists call psychological counterparts. Peers whose differences may be in professional background across industries, different functional expertise, but whose similarities in the scope and scale of their leadership roles. That combination creates the optimal conditions for both challenge and support.
Ah, okay. So it's a very deliberate mix. It's designed to spark new insights through the friction of different perspectives. That's the cognitive diversity bit.
Exactly.
But it's built on a foundation of shared understanding about the weight and complexity of leading at this specific level.
Precisely. The curation is absolutely foundational. It's not just about the number 8. It's about the right 8 women whose combined experiences and ways of thinking will spark insights that likely wouldn't emerge in a less intentionally designed, more homogeneous group. It's about creating a collective intelligence that's greater than the sum of its parts, because those parts are specifically chosen to complement and challenge each other effectively.
Okay, that makes sense. The second key feature you mentioned is structured vulnerability. This feels like it directly tackles that performance paradox and the lack of psychological safety we were just talking about.
It absolutely does. The Alliance operates through regular, structured sessions, and in these sessions, members bring and present specific leadership challenges they are currently grappling with right now.
Okay, real-time challenges.
Real-time, messy challenges. And the source highlights that these sessions use specific protocols. Protocols designed to maximize both emotional authenticity and strategic rigor.
Emotional authenticity and strategic rigor together. That sounds like a powerful combination, but maybe an unusual one in a high-stakes executive context. How does that structured vulnerability actually work?
Well, this structured approach, the protocols, they're designed to overcome that primary barrier we discussed. The inability for these leaders to reveal their thinking while it's still baking, to admit uncertainty, or to explore a really thorny problem fully in environments where any perceived imperfection carries that heavy reputation risk.
Right.
Within the Alliance, these protocols create a container, a safe space where it's not just okay, but expected to say, okay, here's the situation, here's what I'm thinking, but I'm really unsure about X, Y, or Z. What am I missing? What are my blind spots?
Or even, I'm wrestling with the human cost of this strategic decision, and I need to process that with people who actually understand that weight.
Exactly that. This safe, structured space is critical because it provides perhaps the only environment where that necessary, sometimes messy, yet high-rigor exploration can happen without the external pressure to appear fully confident and completely decided from the get-go.
So they can bring their toughest, most ambiguous problems to this group of 8, explore them out loud with peers who truly get the context without feeling like they're exposing weakness or jeopardizing their hard-won standing. That sounds incredibly liberating.
Yeah.
And enabling.
It is. That's the idea. It allows for genuine processing, refining ideas, even ethical wrestling with complex issues that might otherwise get rushed to a decision or maybe never fully explored because of that pressure to maintain the perfect executive facade. It allows the leader to be, well, fully human and fully strategic at the same time.
Okay. And the third key feature, cross-industry wisdom.
Yes, this is another crucial element that really distinguishes the alliance model by deliberately bringing together women from different industries.
Not the same industry.
No, different industries. The model avoids the political considerations, the competitive dynamics, the inherent biases that can really constrain candor, even in well-intentioned, same industry peer groups. You're not worried about sharing competitive secrets. You're sharing fundamental leadership challenges and strategic approaches, but from different worlds.
And does the source offer any evidence, any data to back up the value of this cross-industry perspective specifically?
It does. The article cites research showing that leaders participating in cross-industry peer groups were 34% more likely to implement innovative approaches than those who collaborate only within their own sectors.
Hey, 34% more likely to innovate. That's a huge difference.
Isn't it? It really highlights how powerful seeing things from a completely different angle can be. What's standard practice or a common challenge in, say, finance might spark a completely novel solution when viewed through the lens of an executive from, I don't know, consumer goods or tech or healthcare.
Yeah, different industries develop different cultures, different strategic levers, different ways of solving problems. Bringing those diverse experiences into a trusted dialogue, it must spark connections and insights that are just incredibly difficult to generate if everyone's looking at the world through the same industry lens.
Exactly. That's the engine for innovation here.
So summing up this part then, the core breakthrough of this alliance, as the source presents it, isn't just about finding a community, like a support group. It's about creating and engaging with a calibrated community.
Yeah, calibrated community, yeah.
It's a space intentionally designed where you can be, and this phrase stuck with me, simultaneously vulnerable and strategic. That specific combination, the article argues, is absolutely key to breaking out of that success trap we talked about earlier.
It is. It's the intentional design, the specific curation of the members, and the structured process for vulnerability and rigor, all working together to create this unique environment. An environment where high-stakes strategic thinking doesn't have to happen in isolation, but can actually be fueled and supported by genuine human connection and vulnerability. It directly addresses both sides of that initial paradox of the pinnacle.
Okay, so with this unique structure and approach, the curated intelligence, the structured vulnerability, the cross-industry wisdom, what kind of tangible transformation does the article suggest becomes possible for these women leaders who join an alliance? This brings us to what the source calls the transformation architecture.
Right. The source outlines several pretty significant outcomes. The first one is a dramatic increase in decision confidence.
Decision confidence. Okay, how does that work?
Well, the article explains it as a shift. Instead of feeling like you're carrying the full, immense weight of these complex, high-stakes decisions entirely on your own shoulders.
Which sounds exhausting and risky.
Totally. Instead, you gain access to, as the source puts it, 7 brilliant women who've navigated similar challenges and understand the unique pressures you face.
So it's not just getting random advice, it's getting strategic input from people who fundamentally get it because they've been there themselves,
Yeah,
operating at that same level of complexity and consequence.
precisely. And the source is really careful to emphasize this distinction. These aren't consultants you're paying for opinions based on, external observation or theoretical models. These are strategic allies who understand the nuanced complexity of leadership at your level. Peers.
Okay.
They're offering insights born from their own lived executive experience navigating comparable landscapes. And that peer-level insight, that validation, that constructive challenge offered in a truly trusted context can dramatically increase a leader's confidence in their own strategic judgment, especially when they're facing something novel or deeply ambiguous.
That makes perfect sense. I mean, making decisions that impact potentially thousands of people or huge budgets or the whole future of an organization, it's incredibly heavy.
Immense weight.
Having a group of equals who truly grasp that weight and can offer their perspective refined by similar battles, that must be invaluable. It shifts the process from being this solitary burden to more of a supported collective intelligence exercise.
It fundamentally changes the experience of leading at the top. And the second outcome the source highlights is accelerated pattern recognition.
Accelerated pattern recognition, what does that mean?
The collective intelligence you get from tapping into exceptional leaders across different industries, it provides something the source calls a meta-perspective.
A meta-perspective, okay. Can you elaborate on what that looks like in practice? How does that help a leader?
It means the value isn't just in sharing specific tactical solutions like, oh, when I had that problem, I did X. It's about seeing the underlying patterns of challenges and opportunities that tend to repeat across diverse, high-level contexts.
Okay. Seeing the bigger picture patterns.
Right. It's recognizing, for example, that a really complex stakeholder management issue in the tech industry might follow a similar underlying pattern to a major regulatory challenge in healthcare, even though the surface details are totally different.
Got it.
The meta-perspective is the ability to spot these fundamental patterns earlier and more clearly because you're benefiting from the pattern recognition skills developed by 7 other brilliant minds who are operating in different environments but at a comparable scale of complexity.
So it's like gaining access to decades, maybe centuries if you add it all up, of combined high-level experience, and having those experiences kind of synthesized into fundamental patterns, you can then apply to your own unique situation.
In essence, yes, you leverage the collective pattern recognition to anticipate issues more effectively, frame problems with a broader, more informed lens, and potentially avoid pitfalls that others in the group have already navigated in their own worlds. That provides a significant strategic advantage, especially in a fast-changing global environment.
Okay, that's powerful. And the third outcome, the article frames this one as potentially the most critical for long-term effectiveness. It's called leadership sustainability.
Right. And this involves what the source calls a fundamental shift in leadership identity.
A shift in identity. How so?
This outcome directly challenges the traditional, often quite masculine view of leadership, where vulnerability is seen primarily as a weakness, and authority is perceived as needing absolute certainty and control at all times.
The leader knows all model.
Exactly. The women in the alliance, according to the source, demonstrate something different, something powerful. Strategic vulnerability.
Strategic vulnerability, okay?
The ability to authentically engage with uncertainty, admit maybe you don't have the answer yet, explore challenges openly but in selected, trusted contexts like the alliance. This actually strengthens leadership authority in the long run.
Okay, that feels genuinely counterintuitive for many traditional leadership models. How does showing uncertainty, even in a private group, make you a stronger leader overall?
Well, it's about where and how you express that vulnerability. It's not about, being unsure and waffling in front of your team or the board.
Right.
It's about having a trusted peer space where you can bring the developing thoughts, the ethical dilemmas, the moments of uncertainty that are just inherent in complex decision-making at the top.
Hmm.
By processing these challenges rigorously and authentically with peers who understand, you clarify your own thinking, you gain new perspectives, you build a more robust foundation for your eventual decision.
So then you step back into your leadership role.
Right. And you lead not by faking certainty you didn't feel, but with a deeper, more informed and stress-tested conviction that was born from that exploration. It makes your decisions more resilient, and your authority feels more authentic because it's based on thorough, multidimensional processing, not just putting up a facade of having all the answers from the start.
The source includes a quote, right, from Catherine W., a CEO.
Yes, of a healthcare technology company. And it beautifully illustrates this point. She says, and this really speaks to that performance paradox we discussed.
What did she say?
She says, in my organization, I'm always on, always the decision maker, always the confident leader. That perfectly captures that intense pressure, right? The need to maintain that constant facade of certainty.
Absolutely. Always on.
It does. And then she continues, explaining the impact the alliance had. The 0.5% alliance gives female leaders the one space where they can say, here's where I'm uncertain, here's where I'm still developing my thinking.
The one space.
The one space. And she concludes that psychological freedom has transformed not just how I experience leadership, but the quality of my leadership itself.
That psychological freedom. Wow. That phrase is incredibly powerful, especially thinking about leading at the very top. Having the freedom to simply not be on constantly, to openly explore uncertainty and work through really complex problems with true peers who understand the gravity, that must be profoundly enabling.
It really must be.
It's not just about feeling better, though she probably does. It's about being able to access a deeper level of strategic thinking and ultimately make better decisions. Because your processing isn't being artificially limited by the need to appear infallible all the time.
Exactly. It's not therapy, though it might feel supportive. It's a strategic imperative disguised as peer support. It enables the leader to access their full cognitive and emotional capacity, which should lead to more sustainable high performance.
Which really does suggest a different way of viewing leadership relationships altogether. Moving beyond the purely transactional or the purely informal buddy system.
Absolutely. Which brings us to what the article describes as potentially the most profound shift enabled by the alliance. And that's moving away from traditional networking, which, let's face it, is often transactional, quid pro quo, or just collecting contacts.
What can you do for me?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Moving from that to a model of co-elevation.
Co-elevation. Okay, define that.
The source defines this as a mutual investment in one another's growth, an investment that goes significantly beyond typical professional relationships. It's not just about what I can get from you in this interaction or what you can get from me right now. It's about a deep, shared commitment to lifting everyone in the group, to contributing to their success just as genuinely as you seek their contribution to yours.
A mutual investment. Okay. And how does that shared commitment actually manifest? How does it get reinforced within the alliance structure?
Well, the article brings in concepts from social scientists here talking about reinforcing commitment loops.
Commitment loops.
Yeah. The idea is that by making tangible investments in the success and growth of the other members, maybe it's sharing really hard-won wisdom, providing tough but constructive feedback, or offering genuine support during a crisis, members create this powerful sense of mutual accountability.
Okay. But accountability sounds potentially harsh.
But this accountability isn't punitive, like you didn't meet your target. It's generative. It actually elevates performance across the entire group because you feel more deeply invested in contributing your best insights, knowing others are relying on you, and you know they're equally invested in supporting and challenging you. It creates this virtuous cycle of shared ambition and collective lifting. Everyone rises together.
So the structure naturally results in a community that is simultaneously a deep support system and a powerful performance catalyst. It actively drives higher achievement for everyone involved, not just comfort.
Precisely. And the source argues that the structure effectively resolves that false dichotomy between support and challenge that you often see in leadership contexts.
Right. People often think you either have a nice supportive group where you don't feel judged, but maybe don't get pushed.
The comfort zone.
Or you have a tough, challenging group focused purely on performance, but where vulnerability isn't really welcome. You have to have your armor on.
Exactly. But at the executive level, especially facing these complex challenges, you desperately need both, don't you? You need rigorous challenge to refine your strategic thinking, to spot your blind spots.
Definitely.
But you also need the psychological safety to bring those developing, uncertain, maybe slightly out there thoughts to the table in the first place so they can be challenged constructively.
Right. You need both to truly perform at peak.
Exactly. The research is very clear on this, as the article notes. Leaders performing at their peak require both psychological safety, the freedom to explore and experiment, and rigorous accountability to ensure their thinking is sound and their decisions are robust.
And the intentional architecture of this 0.5% alliance, it's designed to create precisely that balance.
That's the claim. The deep trust built through curation and structured vulnerability creates the safety, while the curated intelligence from diverse, high-caliber peers and the focus on real strategic challenges provides the rigor and the accountability.
So it's support that enables the challenge. It allows you to tackle bigger, harder problems more effectively because you're not doing it entirely alone, and you can access the collective brilliance of the group.
That's a great way to frame it. Support for the challenge. Now, this all sounds incredibly valuable, maybe even transformational.
Yeah.
But as the article hints, this kind of intense, curated, vulnerability and rigor-based alliance, it's probably not for every single woman leader, even at the top. Who does the source suggest is truly ready for this kind of commitment and engagement?
That's a key question. And the article provides some clear indicators.
Yeah.
Almost like a self-assessment for women executives who might be considering if this aligns with where they are in their leadership journey.
Okay, what are the signs?
First, there's the recognition that their current success systems, the networks they use to build their careers, the leadership development programs they did earlier on, are having diminishing returns.
Meaning, the things that were really helpful in getting them to the C-suite or close to it are no longer sufficient to help them navigate the unique, complex challenges they face at the top.
Exactly. Not because those systems were bad, but because the challenges at this altitude are fundamentally different. They require a different kind of support structure. They require the perspective, the strategic rigor, and the specific understanding that really only comes from true peers operating at that same level of influence and complexity.
It's that classic, what got you here won't get you there realization, where there is sustained high-impact leadership right at the pinnacle.
Precisely. The second indicator is a clear awareness that this leadership isolation isn't just a personal discomfort, something to tough out. It directly impacts their effectiveness.
That's a key shift in perspective, isn't it? Moving beyond the frankly understandable personal cost of feeling alone at the top, the stress, the burden, the lack of a real confidant, to recognizing the tangible impact it's having on the business itself. The source emphasizes that decision quality, innovation capacity, strategic foresight, these are all improved by the right kind of peer engagement.
So a leader is ready for this when they see their own isolation not just as a personal burden to be endured, but as a professional limitation, a strategic drag that needs to be actively solved for the good of their work, their team, their organization.
Exactly. They understand that the problem isn't simply theirs to bear privately. It's actually hindering their ability to lead at their highest possible potential. Solving for isolation becomes a strategic leadership imperative.
Okay, makes sense. And the third indicator?
The third indicator of readiness the article highlights is a genuine willingness, even an eagerness, to engage in both giving and receiving wisdom at this highest level.
Yeah, that's not just about taking.
No. The article is very clear that the effectiveness of the alliance relies entirely on a reciprocal flow. Each member must be willing to offer their hard-won insights as generously as you seek guidance from the others. It's explicitly a model of mutual contribution and collective lifting.
So it's not a program you just join passively to receive help. It requires a real commitment to actively contribute significant value from your own unique executive experience and perspective.
Precisely. It demands a generosity of spirit, a willingness to be open and share what you know, and a commitment to the collective success and growth of the whole group, not just maximizing your individual benefit.
The article sort of encapsulates these indicators, doesn't it? By framing the core question for potential members. It's not, have I achieved enough status to qualify for this supposedly elite group?
Right, it reframes it.
The question is more like, Have I recognized that my next level of achievement, my continued growth, my ability to navigate even greater complexity and have even greater impact, depends on accessing the kind of strategic thinking and support that only emerges in a trusted, curated community with equals?
That completely flips the script, doesn't it? It
Yeah.
shifts it from being about past status to being about future need and potential. It's not about proving you belong. It's about recognizing you need this kind of peer engine for your next stage of leadership. Are you ready for what comes after the corner office?
It's a forward-looking perspective, totally focused on future impact and sustainable excellence. Which leads us directly to the specific opportunity mentioned in the article, joining the vanguard.
Yes, the source announces the upcoming launch of the very first 0.5% Alliance cohort. It's scheduled to kick off in August 2025.
August 2025.
Okay, that's right. And the structure is laid out. 8 carefully selected women leaders will form this inaugural group. The sessions will be held bi-weekly, designed specifically, they say, to fit the demanding schedules of senior executives while providing consistent, high-impact engagement.
And the article lists specific admission criteria, doesn't it? Something
Yeah.
about team size or budget.
Yeah, it mentions leadership of 20 or more people or managing budgets exceeding 10 million pounds.
Okay. Why those particular numbers? What do they signify in this context? Is it just about being senior?
Well, the source explains the reasoning pretty clearly. It emphasizes it's not about exclusivity just for the sake of it or creating some arbitrary barrier. It's because, as the article states, shared experience at this level creates the transformation we're seeking.
Shared experience at that level.
Okay. So leading a team of 20 plus signifies a certain baseline complexity in people leadership, organizational dynamics, navigating the human side of large-scale change. And managing budgets of 10 pounds plus signifies a certain scale of financial responsibility, strategic resource allocation, and the high stakes that come with multi-million-pound decisions.
So those numbers represent a threshold of complexity, impact, and strategic responsibility that helps ensure everyone in the alliance is operating with a broadly similar scope of challenges, even if their industries are totally different.
Exactly. The criteria seem less about being elite in some vague sense and more about ensuring that the fundamental shared experience of high-stakes, complex leadership is present, which is crucial for that calibrated community model to actually work effectively.
Right. It ensures that when one member brings a challenge, maybe about a huge restructuring or a massive investment decision, the other 7 women immediately grasp the scale, the internal politics involved, the market implications, the personal pressure, because they've navigated comparable landscapes themselves, just maybe in a different sector. That shared foundation of understanding is what allows for the deep strategic rigor and the authentic vulnerability the alliance is built on.
Makes sense. And the stakes for joining this first cohort are also highlighted in the article. Simply due to its limited nature, only 8 spots available globally in this initial group.
Only 8.
And the source makes it clear that once these 8 spots are filled, the next opportunity to join an alliance cohort won't be until sometime in 2026.
Wow. That detail certainly creates a sense of urgency. And it reinforces that this is intended as a highly curated, limited opportunity. It's not some mass program with rolling admissions. It's for women who are ready to commit now to addressing their leadership isolation strategically.
Yeah, it signals intentionality.
And just reiterating the purpose, pulling from the source again, this alliance is explicitly for women who've reached that summit and recognize that their next level of breakthrough requires strategic alliance, not just more solo effort.
For those who understand that the complex challenges they now face are simply too multifaceted, too high stakes for solitary navigation.
And maybe most importantly, for those who are ready to actively work to transform that pervasive detrimental isolation into a powerful strategic advantage. For themselves, yes, but also for their teams and their organizations.
It really sounds like a call to action for leaders who are not only aware of the problem, but are motivated to be part of the solution, not just for themselves, but for their peers, too.
And circling right back to that core idea, the paradox we started with, the article leaves us with a really powerful reframe, I thought. It suggests you actually become a more distinctive, more impactful leader by being less isolated in your thinking.
How so?
Your unique voice, your unique perspective, it doesn't get diluted or averaged out in the alliance. Instead, it becomes clearer, stronger, more influential, precisely because it's been shaped, challenged, and refined in rigorous, trust-based dialogue with these extraordinary peers who are operating at your level. The 0.5% alliance, in this view, doesn't diminish your leadership uniqueness. It reveals it. It sharpens it.
That's a powerful idea. That true strength and distinctiveness at the top comes not from standing alone in magnificent isolation, but from engaging deeply and strategically with other high-caliber minds.
And the article ends this section with a very direct, very challenging question aimed right at the reader, presumably a woman leader, potentially, in this situation. The question isn't whether you need this. The question is whether you're ready to stop carrying the weight of leadership alone.
Oof, that question cuts right to the heart of it, doesn't it? It directly challenges that ingrained, maybe even culturally celebrated idea that leadership at the highest level must be a solitary, stoic, carry-it-all-yourself endeavor.
And that leaves us with a really important thought to ponder as we wrap up this deep dive. We've explored this phenomenon of summit isolation for women at the absolute top, drawing on the compelling insights, the anecdotes, the data from this source material.
Yeah, we've looked at the very real consequences that echo chamber effect leading to strategic blind spots, the performance paradox creating immense pressure and hindering open processing, and the resulting innovation stagnation.
And we've examined the proposed solution, this 0.5% alliance, as a carefully designed, calibrated community built specifically for co-elevation, not just connection.
We've seen how the lack of strategic peer relationships at this specific rarefied level creates that success trap, impacting not just the individual leader's well-being, but also their sustainability and effectiveness over the long haul.
But let's zoom out for a final thought. Consider the broader implications of this summit isolation, not just for the individual woman leader, which is significant enough, but for the organizations they lead, and even for the broader economy and society they influence through their decisions.
Right. If diverse, high-level strategic thinking at the very top is being potentially stifled by this specific form of isolation, if, as the data suggests, nearly 3 out of 4 senior women leaders feel they lack a safe, effective space for that collaborative collision and co-elevation, that trust-based, rigorous dialogue.
What is the collective systemic cost of not providing these essential structures? What's the opportunity cost?
What potential strategic errors might be made or made more slowly? What critical innovations are perhaps being missed or underdeveloped? What potential for positive societal impact is being constrained because the leaders best positioned to drive it lack the optimal peer environment needed to refine and really stress test their boldest ideas?
Exactly. How might actively fostering such alliances, creating these structured, high-trust spaces for rigorous peer dialogue among women right at the pinnacle of leadership, how might that fundamentally change the landscape, not just for them, but for global leadership effectiveness, for organizational resilience, for innovation capacity, for everyone?
It's a question that really extends far beyond the individual corner office, doesn't it? It has implications for the future of how leadership is conceived and practiced at the highest levels, period.
A crucial question indeed. Something for all of us, and especially those in or aspiring to leadership, to think about. What does it truly take to lead effectively and sustainably in the complex world we're in today?
A lot to chew on there.
Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the source material about the 0.5% alliance. We've gone pretty deep into the problem of summit isolation and this proposed solution, exploring its architecture and the potential transformation it offers.
It's been a fascinating look, definitely. A specific challenge at the very peak of leadership and a potential new paradigm, maybe, for addressing it through strategic partnership, not just individual grit.
If you, listening, are interested in exploring this further, maybe understanding the 0.5% alliance in more detail, perhaps you recognize yourself or someone you know in that description of the leader who might be ready for this kind of alliance. The article mentions requesting a comprehensive program overview. We'll put a link to where you can apparently do that in the show notes for this deep dive.
It certainly sounds like a significant, if very specific, opportunity for those who meet the criteria and feel genuinely ready for that kind of intentional, high-impact peer engagement.
Absolutely. Well, that's all for this deep dive. Keep exploring, keep learning, and maybe keep questioning some of those unspoken realities, especially the ones that exist at the very top.